Hi everybody, Mr. Chris here. My grandpa started a door shop in the 1950s. It grew a lot. And eventually he added a small lumber yard, then a hardware store. And eventually the lumber yard became the main part of the business, and it was called Holmes Lumber. In Amish country, the lumber yard was just called the shop, and so my grandpa came to be called Shop Noe, which means Shop Noah. Now, Holmes Lumber expanded, and my dad married into the family, became a salesman and a manager, and he developed chicken barn sales, which grew the business even more. However, in the early 2000s, the U.S. economy entered a recession, and Holmes Lumber fell on hard times. At the 59th second of the 59th minute of the 11th hour, Holmes Lumber was bought by a different lumber company called Carter Lumber. And while the business remains today with the same name, it has passed out of my family's hands. Recessions are really painful. Over the next 3 sessions, we're going to look at 3 different problems that take place in free market economies. Those problems are, first, the chaos and suffering that result from business cycles. Second, the continual devaluing of currency called inflation. And third, the inherent greed at the core of a market driven by profit motives. We'll take a look at each of these problems to understand what makes them happen and what can be done to correct them. Ultimately, we'll be exploring the argument that even an imperfect free market system with all its problems still provides a better life for more people than a command economy. In this session, we'll take a look at the first problem facing free market economies. That problem is business fluctuations. First, we'll understand business cycles on both a micro and a macroeconomic scale. Second, we'll look at why recessions can actually do good things for an economy. And third, we'll look at ways of preventing recessions from taking place. Finally, we'll look at depressions and recessions throughout history, including the one in which we find ourselves right now. So let's begin. A business cycle consists of a time of increase in business activity followed by a time of decrease in business activity. A business cycle is driven mostly by the demand for the products being offered by a business. However, here in the southern Willamette Valley, the business cycle is mostly driven by the grass seed growing season. In the springtime, farmers and hay crews in the valley make their preparations for harvest. They buy new equipment, they buy supplies, they make arrangements to hire part-time help as soon as harvest starts up. Farmers kick into high gear in summer. Cutting starts in mid-June, combining starts in late June or early July. Haymaking follows right behind the combining. Seed cleaning and bagging also follow right behind the combining. And many seed cleaners store excess seed outside in big piles, and they rush to get it all clean before the fall rains begin. Work crews move into the area for the summer. A lot of teenagers from the area also work over the summer in the harvest. They work on their parents' farm or work for an uncle, a grandpa, or a friend. Teenagers benefit a lot from the increased business activity over the harvest season. As summer turns to fall, things really slow down. Many of the part-time workers go back home or go back to school. Many of the farmers or much of the farm work turns to tractor work that can be handled by the farmer himself. Most of the warehouse seed cleaning work can be carried on by a small crew of workers, and most of the truck driving jobs are carried on by full-time truckers who haul seed or screenings or hay year-round. By winter, things have really slowed down. Truckers are still on the road, some warehouses are still in operation, but during this season, the agricultural cycle in the valley reaches its absolute lowest point. Then, spring comes, and the whole thing starts over again. And that's the point in the cycle in which we find ourselves right now. That's the business cycle that the southern Willamette Valley has experienced for many years, and probably will keep on experiencing for many years to come. Would it be great if the harvest season level of production and jobs would take place all year long here in the Southern Valley? Yeah, that would be awesome, but that's not reasonable for this area. Grass doesn't grow fast enough to support a year-round harvest. The climate here doesn't support that either. People who live in the valley have come to expect the increase and then the decrease of economic activity as the harvest cycle plays itself out year after year. This is one example of a natural business cycle. The same cycle takes place on a national scale as well. The U.S.'s economy goes through stages of expansion followed by stages of recession. At the height of the stage of expansion is the peak. The lowest depth of the recession is the trough. It's easier to think about boom and bust on a smaller scale, such as the South Willamette Valley's harvest cycle that produces mostly grass seed and hay. It's harder to think about boom and bust on a national scale in which thousands of businesses produce thousands of products. So, to make talking about the national economy easier, economists use the term gross domestic product, GDP, to talk about the finished goods and services that the U.S. produces to sell. Finished goods and services means the end product that ends up being consumed by the consumer. So for example, the GDP counts a 2020 Ford F-150, but not each of the component parts that went into making it. The GDP includes all products and services made by Americans living in America, all goods and services made by Americans living in other countries, and all goods and services made by foreigners living inside America. Altogether, that is the gross domestic product of the United States of America. The GDP is slightly different from its sister term, which is called the gross national product. The GNP includes all finished goods and services produced by Americans living in America and all finished goods and services produced by Americans living in foreign countries. However, it does not include any finished goods and services produced by foreigners living within the United States. During times of expansion, the gross domestic product increases as most businesses ramp up production. But during times of recession, the gross domestic product either grows at a slower rate or quits growing entirely and starts shrinking as most businesses ramp down production. The national business cycle looks like a wave. It rises during expansion, then here at the top, it reaches its peak. Then it enters a time of recession. Here at the bottom, it reaches a trough. Then starts a time of expansion, and the whole thing repeats itself. Everybody enjoys the expansion phase of a business cycle. Money flows freely, people get to buy and save money, people buy nicer houses, nicer cars, they go on more vacations, they go out to eat more often. Life as a whole is more comfortable and more enjoyable. Recessions are uncomfortable. Often people are forced to scale back their lifestyles. They sell houses and they rent instead, or they buy smaller houses. They make do with older cars instead of upgrading to newer cars. They travel less. They go out to eat less often. And when things get really dire, people may lose their houses and their cars as the bank repossesses things that people have borrowed money to buy. Now, while recessions are uncomfortable, they actually accomplish some important things for a free market economy. First, recessions weed out businesses that are run badly, inefficiently, and that brings down prices overall as those bad businesses are weeded out. Second, recessions tend to stimulate competition as businesses have to work harder to reach a shrinking number of customers. Finally, recessions tend to make a market economy use up any excess stocks of goods. So in general, recessions are like a diet, cutting out the excess fat of the economy. Now, that's not to say that every single business that has to close down during a recession, or every single person who has to make difficult decisions during recession is actually running a bad business, or that a family was making really bad economic decisions. It simply means that overall there was fat that had to be trimmed out. However, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything about recessions. And what I mean by that is just because a recession can actually do good things for the economy doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do something to prevent recessions. So to carry the diet analogy a little bit further, an economic diet isn't necessary if the economy stays fit and lean to start with. There are two steps to keeping an economy fit and healthy. First, economists keep a sharp lookout for leading indicators that the economy is heading for a recession. Economists collect all kinds of data, they analyze the data, then they interpret it to try to accurately predict where the economy is going. If the economy is heading south, as they say, they will send out alerts to make sure that the appropriate people know. Second, after economists have alerted people that a recession may be ahead, it's up to businesses and government officials to take appropriate actions to fix any problems. Businesses can make course corrections by scaling back production, by cutting employee hours, and by saving money instead of investing into new ventures. Government officials can make course corrections by changing the money supply using the methods we discussed when we looked at the Federal Reserve System. Government officials can also make plans or get ready for a coming recession by cutting back on public expenditures. Sometimes economic factors are simply outside of anybody's control, and nothing that either a business or the government can do will actually change the outcome. The economic recession that we're entering right now was brought on by the coronavirus. As national, state, and local governments acted to slow the coronavirus, they placed restrictions on how much economic activity could take place, causing the economy to shrink incredibly fast. Any traditional methods of making ready for a recession couldn't have solved the dramatic and sudden recession we now find ourselves in. The United States has suffered through four major depressions so far: 1815, 1837, 1873, and 1929. But in between each of these four depressions, the U.S. economy has gone through many different recessions. The most recent recession that we experienced was the Great Recession of 2007. This recession was brought on by far too many homes being built and sold with far too easy access to mortgages. Eventually, the market was oversaturated with houses, and banks had overextended the amount of money they had loaned out. It all came crashing down in 2017, and this crash had a ripple effect through the rest of the economy. Some of you may actually remember that. It happened in your lifetime, and you may remember your family having to make difficult economic choices as a result of the Great Recession of 2007. Of course, the latest recession is the one in which we find ourselves right now. So what will be the outcome of this recession? Will it become a depression? No one can tell right now. The U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Steven Mnuchin, says or remains highly optimistic, saying the U.S. economy will really bounce back this summer once the restrictions are eased. However, the CEO of Expedia Group, a travel company, whose name is Barry Diller, says anyone who thinks this economy is going to bounce, it can't. The damage that is being done is catastrophic. The various opinions about what will happen signal to me that nobody really knows how this whole thing is going to turn out. Now, I'm going to close with one final thought. As I look out toward the future, I am unsettled. I wish I could know how the economy is going to handle this major coronavirus disruption. And I wish I could know when all the restrictions are going to be lifted, but I don't. I don't know how to correctly prepare for the future. Should I sell the house? Should I sell a lot of the stuff we have? Should we move back to Ohio? What should we do to prepare for what's coming? But I simply don't know. And so I feel like I'm kind of standing on top of shifting sand. But I'm trying to have faith in the solid rock. So could we end up losing this house? Maybe. Will I have to sell my cars just to buy groceries? Maybe. Will I have to give up all my hopes, dreams, and schemes for the future? Possibly. Now, these are all extremes, but they could happen depending how everything turns out here. But even if they do, I am trying to rest assured in what Jesus told a crowd of people gathered around him on a sunny day over 2,000 years ago beside the Sea of Galilee. These people who had taken the day off to listen to him were dirt poor. They weren't going to eat that night because they had stopped to listen to this teacher. Jesus told them this, and I'm quoting from Matthew 6. "Don't worry about these things, saying, 'What will we eat? What will we drink? What will we wear?' These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers. But your heavenly Father already knows all your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything you need. So don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today." The key word there, God will give us everything that we need. Maybe I think I need a lot of things that I really don't.